Hello, everybody. Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for June 5th, a Thursday. In fact, the Texas game is 86 days away. The game against Michigan, 177 days away. Planning your next event, make it unforgettable. The Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, is serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddle.com. I'm your temporary host, Tony Gerdeman, here with Kevin Noon of Buckeye Huddle and the Big Me Kickoff. Kevin, before we get started on the show, how you doing?
Well, my feet hurt a little bit. I'm a little thirsty. It's a little
Fantastic,
warm
fantastic. Thank
outside.
you, fantastic. So we wanted to, this is a show idea that you just sent me a little bit ago, and this is, we might start getting into something here. Ryan Day spoke with ESPN, Adam Rittenberg, I believe, or somebody at ESPN, and was asked if the Big Ten should get automatic qualifiers for the college football playoff, and he said yes. I think he's a proponent of the 4-4-2-2-1, which is the Big Ten and the SEC getting 4 automatic qualifiers in the new 16-team playoffs that will be coming, just have not been announced yet. But Big Ten and SEC get 4 teams each in automatically, and then the Big 12 and the ACC get 2 each, and then there's the highest ranked team, group of 6 champion, group of 5 champion that gets in there as well. And then there's 3 at-large teams. So he is a proponent of this, of having the Big Ten get 4 teams in. And I'll give you one of his quotes first, Kevin. He said, "We're in the Big Ten and we have 18 teams and some of the best teams in the country. I feel like we deserve at least 4 automatic qualifiers." Your thoughts?
I know all the arguments that are going to be made, and we'll make them on this show, but I tend to think that the cream rises to the top. And last year, there wasn't a lot of cream in the SEC, and the SEC did not get as many teams as it would have liked. And now you have everybody going full tribalism at this point, and the SEC wants to have its things and is going to try and point out that this completely made up metric called the FPI, which means nothing, should have some sort of seat at the table and everything else. And obviously the Big Ten is going to come out and say that it needs to have what it needs. I mean, obviously you would like to be able to say, well, we know that we're going to get at least 4 first round shares. We all share our money, blah, 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 blah. So we know how to budget and everything else. I am not a big fan of what the output is supposed to be. The output is at least 4 teams in. I think you need to address the input. I think there needs to be uniformity when it comes to, if you want to be part of this, this silly little club, you all have to play 9 conference games. You have to do this. You have to do that. I'm sorry. Drop FCS scheduling. And I know that Ohio State just announced on Wednesday that it picked up a game against University of New Hampshire. Graduated from high school in New Hampshire. I'm not nearly as big on the scene there as Ryan Day is, or Chip Kelly, or anybody like that. But I have been to a football game at UNH at least. I'm not a huge fan of this, but I also think that what Ryan Day's comments, I think they were important because for whatever reason, the Big Ten does not like to control its own narrative and have media availabilities at spring meetings or whatever. So you can't let the SEC have the last word, very much like I won't let Tom Orr have the last word.
Well, so let me just put this out there right now. You are against the automatic qualifiers, correct?
I am.
Okay. By the end of the show, my goal is for you to be in favor of the automatic qualifiers. So the rest of this episode is basically
we're doing a 12-hour show.
Me presenting my case for this, and I have a feeling it's not going to be a 12-minute Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning that you would known to come and know and love. One of the, I guess my first piece of evidence goes along with something that Ryan Day said. He said, if you don't have those automatic qualifiers, you are less likely to play a game like we're playing this year against Texas because it just won't make any sense. If we do, then you're more likely to do that in terms of if we do have automatic qualifiers, then you're more likely to do that, play a game like the Texas game. because we play 9 conference games in the Big Ten. The SEC doesn't. SEC, it's not equal. So it's not equal. So basically, if you don't have automatic qualifiers, there's no reason for Ohio State to play Texas any longer. And if you don't have automatic qualifiers, there's no reason for the SEC to go beyond 8 conference games. So right away, this 5+11 that is being thrown out there that the Big 12 has talked about, the ACC would like, that your 5 automatic qualifiers are your 5 conference champions, your 5 highest rated conference champions, and then 11 at-larges, which would be decided by the College Football Playoff Committee, most likely, which we all know everybody loves them. But with that 5+11, the SEC, the SEC coaches want that. The SEC ADs do not, because it leaves a bunch of money on the table in terms of the extra conference game that they've talked about, the 9th conference game, and also some possible play-in games, which I'll get into in a little bit. But Kevin, the first point here is if you just go 5+11, nothing. And when I say nothing changes, college football is still the best thing going, so like the worst thing that can happen is we just have college football, but you're going to lose. You have given every college program like Ohio State, like Alabama, like Texas, more reason to have a non-conference schedule like we saw last year for Ohio State. You've eliminated the reasons to have big games because there's no incentive to do so, and because those losses can hurt you. And yes, every game is so important. Every game is important. That's never been true. But if you can afford a loss to Texas, that means you're going to schedule more games against Texas and Texas teams. So that's my first point to you, Kevin. If we don't have automatic qualifiers outside of the conference champs, you're just going to get the same old. And not that isn't great, but I think it could be better.
I am going to start by talking about 5+11, and I hate that even more. I'm going to go to the book, the good book, the script of Animal House, and a quote early in the movie: "Let the unacceptable candidates worry about that, because after tonight, they're ... The ACC and the Big 12 are undesirable candidates. You have no say. You're just lucky to be here. I mean, we can go to the good book of Top Gun, and you blank blank, you're just lucky to be here. I mean, and they should just be thankful that they're here." And I know I already had some Clemson fan get mad at me earlier today about something else I said, and I really don't care. I agree with what you're saying on the surface level. And that's why I came out and made a preemptive statement by saying everybody should be coming in with the same rules. 8 or 9. 8 or 9. Sorry, SEC honks. Sorry, Peter Burns. Sorry, dude, I don't know the name of, but I see it camps and think it's weird. I don't care what you're saying about your conference isn't all that much better. Well, Mississippi State only lost to Arizona State by X amount of points. Well, the transitive property has no bearing in determinations of anything. So everybody needs to be playing from an equal position. Now, 9 Big 10 games are still better than like 11 Big 12 games. So, the math isn't always going to be equal. But at least have a modicum of integrity, of trying to have everything put together and making it look similar. So, yes, there is very little upside for playing these grand games of Ohio State Texas series, the upcoming Ohio State Alabama series. LSU finally figured out that interstates do run north. They've had their series with Wisconsin. You still have teams there that are completely chicken to play anything. But, with that being said, I could just sit there and I could rip on scheduling, non-conference scheduling in the Big Ten. Indiana's playing Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. That's horrible. That's horrible, bro. I mean, at least, I can make fun of Iowa, but at least there's the game against Iowa State, along with Albany and UMass. And people, I'll be the first to say, Youngstown State ain't nothing to write home about. The Senator ain't on the sidelines there. Youngstown State keeps popping up on the schedule. Stop it. Nobody wants to see that game. Nobody. I don't want to cover it. You don't want to see it. Oh, we're keeping Ohio dollars at home. You should be punished for playing those types of games. You should be punished if we go
Well,
into Star Wars.
Teams used to be punished for playing those games because they didn't count towards your bowl eligibility.
Good.
But if we go to if it stays 5+11 and the Big Ten gets upset about the SEC not going to nine games and the Big Ten decides to go back to 8, which I don't think they would, you would probably get rid of the FCS games, but you would just replace them with like Akron. Instead of Youngstown State, you're playing Akron, which, or Kennesaw State or Old Dominion, who used to be FCS teams in the past decade or so. At least with the 9 games that the Big Ten plays, you're getting 9 conference games. And most of the programs that care try to put in another Power 4 opponent in there. If you go to the 4-4-2-2-1 and that you only have to be in the top 4 of your conference. And when I say only, there's some caveats there because it's not a given. It's not an easy thing to do. But as long as you're in the top 4, that means there's almost no way that any non-conference game is going to impact you or hurt you because conference records determine where you finish in the conference. So you can schedule whoever you want and you'd have incentive to schedule a tougher non-conference. Now, of course, I've said the same thing every time the playoff has expanded, and I've given too much credit to the people that make these decisions for their bravery, which they don't have. And so like the SEC coaches, they're very much for the 5+11 for obvious reasons, because one, they know the committees love
as their dicks.
The committee loves them. And they know that as long as they stay at 5+11, they don't have to play a 9th game because the Big Ten, like there's the stricture and the structure, like that's all out the window. So they can continue to do what they do and play their 8 games and whatever else they do in the non-conference. And it's just easier. And coaches are always going to side with easier. That's where Ryan Day has been in favor of the playoff expanding. He was in favor of 12 because it's like, hey, it's easier to get to the playoffs. Why would I not be in favor of it?
Teacher, you didn't assign us homework.
Yeah, but it's an easier path forward. And I'm saying 4-4-2-2-1, whether I understand people not liking the whole 4 guaranteed spots, at least 4 guaranteed spots. I understand that. What I'm telling you is the byproduct will result in better games. You'll get better week-to-week games, better non-conference games, better conference games, because you're going to be jockeying for some position in terms of trying to get one of those spots. And then, Kevin, here's my next point for you, which I think is the most genius part of my entire plan. I'm getting rid of conference championship games because they're pointless.
Yeah.
All of the conference champions in the CFP last year went 0-5. So there's no advantage to winning your conference. And I remember Kirby Smart not even wanting to play in the SEC championship last year, like kind of rooting that they would just be the 3rd team from the SEC. So my plan, get rid of that. The top 2 teams in the standings for the Big Ten and the SEC, they make it in. And that's where the play-in games come. So then the Big Ten and the SEC each, Big Ten 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. Those 2 winners are in. And maybe a loser gets one of those 2 or 3 at-large bids. We don't know. And then with the ACC and the Big 12, get rid of those conference championship games because it's 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3. And these are all home games. So I have just taken a 4-4-2-2-1, which, the Big 12 and the ACC are like, we need more than 2. I've just taken a 4-4-2-2-1 and created a 6-6-4-4-1. Basically, and I'm going to go ahead and superpose all of the the numbers and the numerals, and of course do some Steiner math in here. But if you're playing a play-in game, you now control your destiny. So you are in the playoffs. Having a play-in game means you are in the playoffs. So I have just expanded the playoffs without expanding the playoffs, and that's better, right?
I'm still living in the past because I need to know what it is. Are not punishing and incentivizing the same thing? Because they're not. We're not going to punish you if you play this game, but are we really giving you an incentive to play this game? It doesn't just because you may not sit there and take it on the chin the way you would if you sit there and you go to Iowa City and you lose by 30 points in a league game. I still don't see any reason why Ole Miss is going to agree to a home and home with Penn State, or why USC is going to agree, with a home and home against whoever. You're still, we're still in a mindset of where perfection is the only way that you can assure yourself of winning a national championship. Well, we're not in a world of the NFL where a bunch of old dudes are sitting there drinking champagne and Metamucil to celebrate the 72 Dolphins for being the last undefeated team or whatever. I mean, hell, I was born in 71 and I'm old as dirt. So it's been a long time since that's happened. So we're still not of a mindset of where I think people really are accepting that you can lose a couple of games along the way. Now, of course, Ohio State lost a couple of games along the way, but there are also going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, oh, but that really felt dirty because, certainly the game at home against the team up north, and then just, the way that nothing seemed to work right at Oregon or whatever. So just because you open the door to playing these types of series, if there's no language in there saying, no, seriously, guys, you need to play those types of games. No, it's just opening up the door for more games against Furman, the Citadel, and VMI. So I have no faith whatsoever that is going to change anything. Now, I know your goal of this is to get me to change my mind, and I'm just telling you right now that my heels are so dug in that my heels are in the basement of my house right now. They're so dug in. They burrowed through the hardwood floors, everything else. You're not going to move me an inch on that. But I will say, getting rid of the conference championship games makes all the difference in the world, because you can replace those dollars with other content by, going in and this isn't something, this isn't apples to apples with college basketball and creating opportunity with the, the conference champion winner, doing this. I mean, what are going to be the chances that there's not a scenario where like a 7 seed in the Big Ten is suddenly going to find themselves in Indianapolis and play their way in? You're not going to end up with that 13 and 16 UC Irvine team that's suddenly going to make the big dance because they got hot at the right time, and St. Mary's and Gonzaga and Loyola Marymount and everybody else got lost on the way to the arena or whatever. And actually, I don't think they're in the same conference. One's in the Big West, and I think the other's was in the old West Coast Athletic Conference. But the point being is, you can lead a horse to water, but we're dealing with a lot of jackasses and not horses when it comes to scheduling, and they're going to get stuck in their old ways. And the reality is that, congratulations, you make the playoff at 9-3 or whatever, and you could still get run. I mean, I'm really mixing metaphors here, but the New York Knicks had their most successful season since pre-oxidation of the Statue of Liberty, and Tom Thibodeau's out. So nobody really has any real slack in terms of the leash that's against them. So I think that you can come to the table with all the best interests in the world, in the spirit of the game and in the spirit of goodness and everything else, and none of that's going to be followed because the whole thing is just a bunch of shenanigans anyway.
Why did the Big Ten go to 9 conference games?
Money.
Exactly. So that's why the SEC will go to 9 conference games, because ESPN wants it. The ADs want it. They've basically already talked about it, and that's money that they already have in mind. That the ADs don't like the 5+11, the coaches do. The networks like the 4-4-2-2-1. I would believe, because there's more content for them. So that's why I think you could see them going to 9 conference games for the money. That's why you've also seen the Big Ten versus SEC challenge kind of thrown out there, where there's a scheduling agreement. So again, that's network.
The Big Ten is really good at honoring those. Whenever you get into one of those deals with the Big Ten, your conference falls apart.
Well, and it's like when they, crazy things happen when you do that. So just know, just don't call it an alliance. Just call it an agreement, a friendship bracelet of some sort. I tend to think the SEC would do some pushback, and maybe the Big Ten would as well, because of all of the SEC teams. Like if you go to 9 conference games, and then you also have half of the SEC that plays their ACC in-state rival. So now you'd be asking those teams to play 11 Power 4 games, which is a lot for anybody, especially when you're already playing an SEC schedule. As we know, there's nothing more difficult than that. But I think you'd see it at least go to, I think you will see the SEC go to 9 conference games, unless they stick with the 5+11. Then there's no reason to change, unless, of course, ESPN's like, hey, what was all this 9 conference game talk? We would sure like that, because some of these games, they just aren't great, and we'd like to create more great games. And it's almost like which needs to happen first. They go to a 4-4-2-2-1, or they go to a 9 conference game schedule, because I think either way leads to the other. But it is interesting to see this 5+11 thing gaining steam. And you already said you're against it. But that's what's going to happen.
It needs to be 0+16. You just nothing. Nobody's locked in. You win your conference and you're left out, then we need to have an investigation. I don't think there needs to be anything. It's a tournament. I don't think there needs to be any sort of things put in motion to have this here. I understand, and I said it earlier, well, everybody wants to be able to know what they're to budget for and everything else. So, if you're the Big Ten of the SEC and the number is 16, it's fair to say that each of you are going to get 25% of the field in. You're going to get 4 teams. That's just the way things are going to work. The SEC, as I said, is already trying to cook the books and change criteria. We know in the SEC, it's not who you beat, it's how you look, who you show up against, if they have a little dumb patch on their jersey, whatever the hell it is. I mean, I'm surprised that they spelled graduate correctly. It's all of. Oh, I'm full of piss and vinegar. You really got me on a topic that I have a lot of opinions about. But with that being said, I don't think there needs to be anything. I think what we need to be taking all this time and figuring out some level of fairness in how we determine the teams that get in. And of course you can say, well, we're creating fairness. We're doing 5+11. We know that it's the 5. And well, then what the hell do you do with the 11? I don't particularly like the 4+4+2+1. Oh, and then we got to have a spot for Notre Dame, maybe, who is in the pool, but out of the pool and everything else. And, there are so many people that are only halfway in the pool, a quarter of the way in the pool, a third of the way in the pool. You can't come to the damn swim party and say, no, I just had a big lunch. I'm just going to sit outside and just watch. I mean, you're in or you're out. You're in or you're out, and you deal with it. And as long as everybody is sitting there with various levels of commitment, whether it be on a conference level or team level or whatever, you're never going to have a system that is really going to be representative of what it should be. I think we should just have like an electoral college. Well, and that's how we should do this.
You want some means of getting in. Like, you want to know how you're going to get in. But if we don't have automatic qualifiers, you're just leaving it up to complete opinion. And now generally, it wouldn't be if you have a 4-4-2-2-1, you have play-in games, you have people actually playing their way in. as opposed to, you know what, we think.
But is
Ole
everybody
Miss,
doing it? But is everybody on board with play-in games? I mean, you brought up play-in games, but I
it's
mean,
been
is that truly the legislation that is written on the back of a bar napkin right now, saying that 4+4+2+2, that it has that, or are we just saying we're going to have this pool of teams, but we know 4 marbles are going in this cup, and 4 marbles are going in this cup, and two and whatever, and you're not necessarily addressing how that's there, and you still don't necessarily have any fairness if you don't have play-in games. What is the difference between 3 and 5 in the league when you all? I mean, you're having to get to some sort of beauty contest or whatever. I mean, if you have a bunch of teams that are, we'll just use 9 conference games that are 6-3, and again, in that, for that to happen, we're talking a very top heavy league versus a more middle heavy league, and I don't necessarily want to get into like 5-4 because then things really get muddy at that point. But again, I think criteria is the biggest issue right there, and I think that the Big Ten really needs to kind of get on board with at least identifying what it feels some of this criteria should be, because it makes too much sense to settle it on the field. It makes way too much sense to settle on the field. We're going to have a playoff and settle it on the field. Have we really had a year where there hasn't been at least a little bit of controversy? I mean, controversy last year. I can't believe Ole Miss and South Carolina and whoever the hell were left out. Brought to you by the law firm of Crystal, and calling every Coke a Coke, and whatever the hell else they do down in the South, and Cracker Barrel.
Well, I'll say, how do you determine 5th place versus 3rd place? You use the standings, and that's how you do that.
What if there's no head to head?
Let me finish, because what you're suggesting is just do it based on opinion. You're saying you want to have a uniform way of deciding who's in the playoffs, but your solution is opinion. And Kevin,
because it's always going to be opinion.
No, it's not. It's not. It's standings.
But standings aren't fair. If Indiana is in there at the end, and their non-conference schedule again is Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State.
That's not Big Ten conference standings, though. That doesn't.
But that's still going to be part of it, because if you get to a point and there's no head-to-head, if 2 teams that you're trying to determine did not play each other, have the same league record, as you go through the levels, at some point, overall record, and the assumption is going to be you're going to win all your non-conference games if you're not scheduling anybody. So how do you get any sort of determination when you have a bunch of null entries, like not NOLL, our friend, NULL entries, because nobody plays anybody in the non-conference. So again, I just think that it's a case of, we need to sit there and have, if you really want to be part of this is how you have to handle your scheduling. Sorry, but not sorry. Get rid of FCS. Sorry, you're out. You're out. You have to play at least one game against, you have to play at least one game against a Power 4 foe or whatever to get a point in whatever the formula is, to sit there and get a scratch and sniff sticker on your paper, on your term paper or whatever. You have to hit certain benchmarks. And if you choose, well, we're just happy to be here, and you're not going to do that, well, then you're just not really serious about it. And this is all a moot point, because honestly, college football has to break away from this current structure that it is, because you have teams that have been born into old money that are not spending any money, that don't deserve to be in the mix, and it's making everything more confusing, more cantankerous. And I do thrive on chaos some days, so I'm thriving on this, but I have no faith whatsoever that a bunch of people who are sitting there, trying to enrich themselves, and are the ones who are supposed to be looking after, gatekeeping the best interests of the sport and of how things are set up. And it is an absolute conflict of interests. So I don't want to go to I don't want to go to blind computers. I don't believe in that. But I also think that everything started to go downhill when the BCS and everything else took away margin of victory and some of those other things. Well, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Oh, grow the bleep up.
I
Grow
think
up.
I think computers wouldn't be as bad nowadays because you're not just choosing the top two teams. And my thought on this, every time when you went from 2 to 4 is it's better. And so that the team that is 5 has no reason to cry because everybody agreed that 4 was better than 2. So shut up. Nobody at 13 last year had a reason to cry because everybody agreed that 12 was better than 4. And so somebody's always going to be upset. Somebody's always going to be left out. Shut up. You had your chance. You should have been a little bit better. Maybe next time.
Mr. I love computers. You know that all you have to do is go into Wikipedia, which of course is never wrong, but this is not wrong here. And 2 computers named Oregon national champions.
Yeah, and I'm not saying go to computers. I'm just saying it would be better if it would be less controversial, and not to choose national champions, but to choose who is in the playoffs, because again, you're distrustful of the people that you're also trying to give all of the control to in terms of choosing who the playoffs are, or the playoff teams are. And I think that's more dangerous than just having the teams play. In terms of, are there play-in games? They've been talked about, but what does that mean? The SEC has even talked about 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, which is insane to me. Like, don't even make imagine the anger that, say, Kirby Smart is the coach of the 1 seed, having to play the 8 seed for what? For no reason. And really, that's the same thing with the conference championship games now. One other point, tiebreakers. I just like Big Ten tiebreaker has, they do not consider non-conference scheduling at all and all of that. It's all just records against conference teams in this fashion or that fashion. And then it's Sports Source Analytics as like the 6th or 7th tiebreaker chooses, or then it's just a random draw.
And I was going to say, and then there's a coin flip, and then there's pistol to dawn. I mean, it's just a lot of stupidity that's on there, and I understand it, but I think that we can't sit there and talk about, well, the Big Ten wants this uniformity of 9 conference games and everything else, and like seriously, you're 3 levels away from playing Rochambeau against each other to determine who could be in the playoffs. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at that point. So if you put in play-in games to a certain extent and you cap it, at least you can say things are being taken care of on the field. But the reality is I guarantee you, I will write this story at some point about there are 11 teams going into 2025, and that's just a random number, maybe smaller. There are 11 teams that realistically have a shot at winning the national championship, and we already have a playoff that's sitting at 16, or will be sitting at 16. And then you sit there and you start expanding to play-in games and everything else, and then before you know it, the NC2A basketball tournament is 212 teams.
That's a different sport. That's not part of this.
But that's not part of it. But again, it's let's just keep expanding it out and dilute it to where it tastes like really bad Kool-Aid. And that's the direction we're going in right now. I'm okay with 12. I'm okay with 16. I'm not okay with more than that. I'm okay with more than that if we sit there and we take the have-nots out of these conferences that just happen to be in the right room at the right time in 1992 and manage to get in and have not put a single investment. Some of them playing in just, high school stadiums. Vanderbilt. I mean, yeah, well, that too. But at least Purdue has a little bit of a better track record of being a giant killer than Vanderbilt. Notwithstanding their 38th year senior quarterback that they have right now.
Well, let me ask you this: would you rather watch a Big Ten championship game between 2 teams that are obviously in? Because again, all of the participants in the conference championship games, the 4 major conference championship games last year, got into the playoffs. Nobody lost their way out, which is something that the committee said they don't plan on doing. They don't plan on punishing somebody for losing that game, which means the game is meaningless. And there's no cost to it. There's no benefit to it. So would you rather watch a Big Ten championship game or 2 Big Ten games that same day where the winners are in the playoffs and the losers are more than likely out and there's actual stakes?
Well, of course, I'd want to see the latter, but it needs to be a case of if you lose that game, you're out. Sorry, you're just
You
out.
can't do that because you still need the math. You still need two
Well, no,
at-large teams or three.
if you just sit there, if you sit there and you're breaking four into 2+2,
Mhm,
1 and 2 are in your top two,
mhm,
and then 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. If that's what
mhm.
we're
Right.
saying there, if you're three,
You may still have an opportunity, but it's going
and
to
I
be
don't
small.
like, but I don't like that. I don't
That's
like
just
that. I
that's
think
math, though. That's math.
Well, I think it just has to be part of the arrangement. But then again, you're getting in a point of where if you're the Big 12
Hmm.
or whoever, and you're not having that, so you're putting a disadvantage to the bigger conferences by potentially knocking out its more powerful. It's 3 and it's 4. But if you sit there and you're 3 and you lose to 6, and then you make it in, and
Yeah.
God forbid 6 doesn't make it in because of math, then
No, no.
what the hell do we just do?
Six wins their way in. Three, like I don't have a problem not saying you can't be in the playoffs if you lose a play-in game, but what's going to happen is somebody else is going to fill that spot. Somebody from the Big 12 or somebody that the 7 team from the Big 10 is going to fill that spot, basically. So you're going to need three at-large teams. One of them is probably Notre Dame, and then you're going to have two spots that are going to have to be filled by either Big 12 or ACC teams that didn't make their play-in games, or an ACC and a Big 10 team that lost their play-in game. Now, generally, it's there may not be any of this happening, but like if you're the 5th seed or the 6th seed and you lose, you're most likely not going to be in. So it's going to have to be a 3 or a 4. And in which case, then it becomes a situation where it's like, well, we had to pick somebody, and so it's that 3rd seed or that of the Big 10 or the SEC. Because again, I wouldn't have a problem saying there's no way to get in after you lose. I just don't know how the math works on that. Like so Ohio State is the 3rd seed and they lose, so they're out, but Kansas State gets in at 8-4.
Well, and it's the flawed system, and
Mhm.
you can sit there and sell this under the pennant of opportunity, and all I'm seeing is hoop jumping. You're going to jump through a lot of hoops if you're truly in one of the consequential conferences. If you're in one of the two conferences, because there's not a power four, it's power two, and then everybody else, just damn glad to be here. Um, and then you have Notre Dame just sitting there
Mhm.
eating its full share, listening to stupid Dropkick Murphys, being annoying, probably spraying graffiti on some crap. I mean, the again, there has to be. I came into this whole thing, and all I've done is now I've dug into molten earth. I'm so dug in on my positions. We're sitting there bending over backwards for people that we shouldn't be bending over backwards for. Sorry, your league sucks. Sorry, Miami has never won the ACC in its entire time that it's been in the ACC. Sorry that the Big 12 lost its two war daddies and had to sit there and pick the bones of the Pac-12 after the Big 10 got what it wanted. I don't, again, I think that first and foremost, there's no clean answer. There really is no clean answer. Uh, Guaranteed berths, I don't like. Um, I don't like a couple of guaranteed berths, and then just this indiscriminate.
Mhm.
Everybody, 5+11. Everybody else is just is free to go about. It's like Cannonball Run. You just know you need to get from New York to Malibu and do everything, whether or not you're in a really awesome Japanese car
Mhm.
or in an ambulance with a really weird doctor and
Mhm.
and Captain Chaos or whatever. Um, it's way too willy nilly for me. It doesn't pass muster, and honestly, we are within 1,000 days of a conference suing because they don't like the way that things were there, and that'll truly be a dark day in the sport because nobody can just sit there and take what it is at face value, and everybody's got to be a little crybaby female dog about it.
It feels like the easiest solution or the solution with the least amount of pushback is 5+11. because the Big 12 and the ACC and the SEC, it sounds like, would sign off on that. And I don't know that will the Big 10 drag their feet on that. Probably not. James Delaney probably wouldn't have liked it, but then he would have acquiesced like he always did. You know,
there was no laundry money.
Yeah, he didn't like the playoffs, didn't like this, didn't like that, but started a network which made a bunch of money and changed the industry forever. But again, we've gone over this. I think you've come to my side of things, even if you won't
Absolutely
say it.
not. Absolutely not.
Even if you're non-committal on whether or not you've come over to my side of things, I think
Absolutely not.
I think it's clear that you have. I want to thank you for joining me today. And this show, I don't know if it's the longest Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning ever, but I'm going to have to go ahead and put it in the
But
Buckeye Weekly feed.
it's probably the best.
It's the best. I should just give the countdown for the rest of the weekend. Then also we'll make this the Friday show as well. But no, we'll have something for Friday. Want to thank you all for tuning in. Of course, if you hit the thumbs up, if you're watching on YouTube, we would appreciate that. If you've not done so already, of course. And go ahead and check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com because there are official visits this weekend going on. We got Berman and Mark Gibler talking about that. Of course, camp season has started. Today is the first day of camp. We hopefully will have something after camp. There's going to be a lot of possible rain and storms on Thursday, so we'll see how that goes and make
I didn't
things
know that.
a little more interesting for Kevin, who will be carrying around some camera equipment. Just maybe stay inside.
No, I won't.
So,
no, I won't.
Well, yeah, summer storms, there's not generally a lot of lightning involved with that sort of stuff, but so go ahead and whatever we have for you, you can find at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And of course, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month is $4.99. Like I said, a ton going on and a ton more to come. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.